This is not a media failure. This is a failure of the Democratic Party. And I just sort of the virtue signaling that some people have done to try to say that the media missed this story. They didn't miss this story. David Ignatius wrote, I just refuse to accept this stupid premise because it's a manufactured right-wing premise in order to stain the media. The people at fault are Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, every elected member of Congress. The Democratic Party let that disaster happen. That is not a media failure. That is a Democratic Party failure. And only right-wing manufactured outrage who claims the media and the Democratic Party work as one have fused it into this. And I'm just sick of the handful of journalists who are trying to enhance their own reputations by playing into this false notion.
I don't think anyone's trying to enhance reputations. They're just doing their job, something you failed to do. Former NBC host Chuck Todd speaking with former CNN commentator Chris Cillizza on his podcast. Remember, he's no longer there with MSNBC. Todd claiming the media did not miss the story of former President Joe Biden's mental decline. It was the Democrats, it was not the media, and it was all right-wing conservative news.
What about when he called out to the dead Congresswoman, right? Are you blaming Democrats for that, or the media who just moved past it? Or when they went along and echoed the cheap fake narrative, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just Republicans who saw that. It was media who chose to look the other way. With that, let's welcome in our political panelists. Want to get their take. Andrea Kaye joins us, host of The Andrea Kaye Show. Ashwani Jain is a Democratic strategist. So 2 different perspectives. Great to have you both. And we are awaiting remarks on the National Day of Prayer. So apologies in advance if we have to go there. Andrea, I'd like to start with you. Your thoughts on what Chuck Todd just had to say.
Well, I mean, to me, Chuck Todd was trotting out the old Bill Clinton. Let's debate the definition of what the word is actually is. Because what he was trying to do there is trying to separate and define out, look, it's not the media's fault because there's media and then there's journalist. And Ignatius is an actual journalist, and he reported on this in 2020, thereby providing an excuse for MSNBC, CNN, and all the rest who absolutely refused to report the truth. And what about all the legacy media that sat there when Karine Jean-Pierre referred to the videos of Joe Biden as deep fakes?
Yeah, it is a good point. It's hard to argue at this point, Ashwani, that the legacy media missed the mark. You could say, how do you know that? Well, because the CNN anchor Jake Tapper and another, they're already authoring a book, The Cover-Up, right? You saw on one of the other cable news networks, I believe it was MSNBC, could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was, where one of the panelists said the biggest miss was the obvious cognitive decline of President Joe Biden. But somehow Chuck Todd, he's still stuck in the past. Why is that, Ashwani? Or do you find yourself siding with Chuck Todd?
Well, I agree with Chuck Todd that the Democratic Party needs serious reforms, right? Focusing more on voters, not donors, and more progressive policies. But I think the internal critique at an MSNBC highlights a larger truth, that healthy democracies rely on a press that can question itself, strive for balance, and remain independent. And I think what's troubling is that President Trump has labeled journalists the enemy of the people. He's tried to strip away press credentials from reporters he doesn't like, and he blacklists entire outlets that hold him accountable. And I think the danger is that it's not media criticism, it's actually a blueprint for authoritarian control.
Thanks.
All right. That's an interesting take that you have. Andrea, I see you shaking your head. Oh, it was on CBS. There we go. No problem. Where that was mentioned. Andrea, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, absolutely. How did we pivot somehow from the greatest cover-up by the legacy media in order to cover up the fact that we had a cognitively challenged, if not dead, president, and to somehow Trump being an authoritarian? Look, what he was trying to do here was trying to give a pass for the legacy media, the same legacy media that for 4 years lied to the American people and said that there was actual evidence of Trump colluding with Russians. You cannot separate the media from the Democrat Party. That is their spokespeople who push out the leftist Democrat Party propaganda all day, every day.
I think they call that spin. I want to move over to question 3, control, if I can. I'm still watching the prayer service, so we'll jump to that when it gets started. People are getting seated. But I did want to get Ashwani's take on this. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz saying one reason he was chosen as former Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate in the recent election was because he could, quote, code talk to white guys watching football and fixing their truck and put them at ease. Walz describing himself as the permission structure for the white man in rural America to vote for Democrats. Ashwani, what are your thoughts on how Walz portrays himself? The code talk to white guys. That's why he was picked.
I mean, I respect Governor Walz, but Democrats candidly have never needed to code talk to earn the support of white voters. Just last year, Harris earned over 75 million votes, which was just 2 million shy of President Trump, whereas 90 million voters just didn't turn out at all. And so that proves that voters, regardless of race, care more about who's fighting for them than who's performing for them. And I think that's why we need to focus on newer, tangible, progressive policies and really prioritize grassroots candidates over corporate-backed candidates and voters over big donors.
Okay.